What would you see in this painting if you didn't know its title? A serene pastoral landscape depicting the daily life of villagers. A farmer busy plowing the field. A shepherd watching over his sheep. A fisherman patiently waiting for a catch. A ship sailing away. But wait, do you think someone jumped off the ship for a refreshing swim? What are those feathers near his splashing feet? Did a seagull fly by? In reality, this is a painting that would be difficult to fully appreciate without its title. It is one of the most famous and enigmatic works of the great Flemish master Pieter Bruegel the Elder, created around 1560. However, relatively recently, it was discovered that this piece, often associated with Bruegel, is not actually by his hand. Modern research indicates that it is a copy made by an unknown artist from an earlier original that has not survived. The exact date of this copy remains a mystery. Different sources provide quite contradictory datings. As for Bruegel's original work, opinions differ here as well. Modern American expert on Bruegel's art, Professor Larry Silver from the University of Pennsylvania, suggests that the original was painted around 1560, during the early period of the artist's career. Despite the fact that only a copy remains, the plot and composition allow us to appreciate Bruegel's intention. The painting is titled The Fall of Icarus. However, Icarus, the central character of the myth, is not immediately noticeable in this canvas. From a high point, there is a breathtaking view of an idyllic seaside landscape where life goes on as usual. In the field, a farmer works hard with a horse, diligently plowing the land against a backdrop of majestic mountains. His red sleeves stand out against the green sea. On the slope, a shepherd grazes a flock of sheep with his loyal dog, thoughtfully gazing at the sky. By the water, a fisherman is deeply engrossed in his task. The overall atmosphere of the scene is light and almost ephemeral, with numerous ships navigating the waters and snow-capped mountain peaks on the horizon. In the distance, a cozy town can be seen along the shore with a small port. The sun sets on the horizon, birds fluttering about. But hidden in this idyll is a dramatic detail: the fall of Icarus, unnoticed by everyone around. The painting's theme is based on Ovid's text. In the 16th century, subjects from ancient mythology were typically derived from original sources. One of the most popular sources was Ovid's poem, Metamorphoses, which contains numerous myths from ancient Greece. Specifically, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, there is an extensive description of this episode. Daedalus and his son Icarus are on the island of Crete, held captive by King Minos. They wish to escape, but King Minos has ordered that they not be given any means of transport, no boats or ships. Swimming away from Crete is impossible. Although Daedalus and Icarus appear to be free, they are effectively prisoners. Realizing the sea route is closed, Daedalus decides to use the sky for their escape and proposes to fly. He constructs wings from bird feathers, binds them with wax, and successfully tests them, ensuring they can hold him aloft. Then he makes similar wings for his son Icarus and gives him two important pieces of advice before the flight. According to Ovid, the first piece of advice was for Icarus to follow his father's path. The second warned against flying too high, lest the sun melt the wax, and not too low, to avoid the wings getting soaked and heavy. Both scenarios posed a danger of falling, so they should maintain a middle altitude. These instructions from Daedalus, as described by Ovid, reflect two crucial principles of ancient culture and aesthetics: following an example and adhering to the golden mean. Ovid continues the story of how Daedalus and Icarus set off on their flight. Daedalus adhered strictly to his own advice, maintaining a moderate altitude. However, Icarus, overwhelmed with excitement and a sense of omnipotence, decided to fly higher. As his father had warned, the sun melted the wax, the wings fell apart, and Icarus plummeted into the sea from a great height, perishing. It's worth noting that this story was quite popular. Many artists approached this theme in their works, be it engravings, drawings, or paintings. They enjoyed depicting the moment when Daedalus, while flying, turns back searching for Icarus, who is already falling, and dramatically reaches out to him. In Hans Boll's watercolor, the drama unfolding in the air is beautifully conveyed. The story carries a moral lesson, illustrating the consequences of disobedience and neglecting wise advice. It serves as a reminder that pride and the desire to exceed one's capabilities can lead to downfall. One must be aware of their limits and adhere to the golden mean. Ovid is perceived as an author whose works carry a didactic nature. When closely examining the watercolor, one can notice people at the bottom of the image. There is an island with a castle, and on the shore, a green meadow can be seen where Daedalus and Icarus, with wings, practice their movements in preparation for the flight. Above, they are flying, as indicated by the matching colors of their clothing, a common practice for depicting the same character in different temporal situations within a single work. This was seen not only in the Middle Ages, but also during the Renaissance. In the foreground, people are engaged in their activities. A ploughman with a plough and 2 horses looks upwards. A group of people also gaze at the sky, some shielding their eyes from the sun. Nearby there is a dog, possibly accompanying hunters or shepherds. On the shore, fishermen with rods and a shepherd with sheep, who also has his head raised, are visible. All of them, engaged in rural labor, are distracted by the spectacle in the sky. And they are engaged not just in any rural work, but in 3 specific ones: the ploughman, shepherd, and fisherman. There are even several representatives of these professions: several fishermen, several shepherds. These scenes correspond to Ovid's text, where it is mentioned that people stop their activities to watch those flying across the sky, as if they were new gods. The ploughman, shepherd, and fisherman are included in the depiction not by chance. They precisely match the description in Metamorphoses. When considering Bruegel's work, despite differences in technique and composition, the plot remains the same. His painting also features a ploughman, a shepherd with a dog and a flock of sheep, as well as a fisherman with a rod. However, Bruegel made significant changes. Firstly, no one is flying across the sky. Only Icarus's legs are sticking out of the water, but these legs need to be found, discerned, and identified. For an unprepared viewer seeing this painting for the first time without knowing the story, identifying Icarus's fall from the sky is challenging. Furthermore, Bruegel removes the motive of people on the shore pausing their activities and looking up, contrary to what is stated in Ovid's text, where everyone follows the figures flying in the sky with their gaze. In Bruegel's painting, the ploughman looks down at his feet. The shepherd, indeed, looks upwards but stands with his back to the fallen Icarus. The fisherman, seemingly near the fallen Icarus, is focused on his fishing rod and looks clearly down towards the shore where he casts his hook. Thus, Bruegel does not merely illustrate this plot. He begins to interpret it. He interacts with Ovid's text, not as an illustrator, but as an interpreter. He adds the motive of a sailing ship moving away from the site of the fall. Is this accidental or not? Is it merely for aesthetic purposes, for artistic balance, or does it hold some meaning? The question remains open. When we talk about Bruegel, he constantly presents us with certain puzzles, and even his contemporaries understood that he acted in this way. Why do I claim that contemporaries understood this? Because there is an important preserved document, a short text. Bruegel had a friend, Abraham Ortelius, a well-known humanist, cartographer, and creator of the Atlas of the World, who personally knew the artist. Ortelius kept a handwritten journal with entries, many of which were about Bruegel. Although it's just 1 page with a few lines, it contains a key phrase: Bruegel depicts what cannot be depicted. Ortelius speculates that perhaps nature gave Bruegel so little time to live because it envied his talent, with which he surpassed it as an artist. Instead of merely copying nature, Bruegel created his works, almost becoming its rival. This can be considered a kind of religious or philosophical approach to understanding the artist's role. Ortelius emphasizes that Bruegel had the ability to depict what cannot be seen, and his works allow us to see the invisible. Thus, this entry indicates that contemporaries were aware that Bruegel's works should not be taken literally. There is something in his paintings that is not visible to the eye. We can study his works in detail, but there will still be something that eludes our gaze. What is the meaning of this ship? Jürgen Müller, a very authoritative modern German specialist on Bruegel, offers an interesting interpretation. Bruegel expresses skepticism about the progress of his time. In the painting, there is an expensive modern warship. We understand it's a warship because there are rows of gunports and cannons. Such ships can cross oceans. And what are the ship's sails? They are its wings, of course. Thus, if we consider this painting as a warning about what happens to those who become too carried away by their ambitions and arrogance, rising above what is permitted, then the ship near the site of the fall may serve as a prophecy for sailors. People, you conquer the seas and cross oceans, believing that the whole world lies at your feet and that all its riches are now yours. It's like Bruegel's skeptical remark about the intoxicating sense of humanity's power in the 16th century. It's quite interesting. We cannot say for sure if this is the case, but it sounds logical. However, of course, another interpretation could be suggested. For example, the ship is added to the figures of the shepherd, plowman, and fisherman, and it moves away from Icarus, emphasizing the idea that no one pays attention to Icarus, neither those on the shore nor those at sea. This enhances the motive of indifference. This aspect of interpretation has also been developed and vividly demonstrated by many of its interpreters. In a well-known poem by Wiston Auden, Musée des Beaux-Arts, the second part is dedicated to Bruegel's painting. Auden reflects on the nature of suffering and notes that the old masters were very insightful on this issue. They understood that suffering usually goes unnoticed by those around and that, essentially, no one cares about the sufferer. Moving from general reflections on the old masters, Auden directly addresses Bruegel's painting, using it as an illustration. Bruegel shows that although the cry of the boy falling from the sky can be heard, no one cares. The sun mercilessly shines. Everyone turns away, and the majestic and beautiful ship sails calmly into the distance. For Auden, this departing ship symbolizes indifference to Icarus's suffering. It's another interpretation of the painting, which is undoubtedly good, logical, and expressive, especially in poetic form. But it's an interpretation for the consciousness of a person contemporary to Auden, with romantic views on things, and it has its place. But it's time to talk about a broader perspective. It's time to pay attention to this plump bird. It's a partridge. What is a partridge doing here? This is the sea. It would be fitting to have some kind of seagull. What is a partridge to do against the backdrop of the sea's green water? In Ovid's Metamorphoses, right after the tale of Icarus falling into the sea, there's a story about a partridge happily flapping its wings in a swamp because it had heard the news of Icarus falling from the sky. Ovid tells the story of the partridge immediately after the fall of Icarus, making it essentially one narrative. Daedalus, Icarus's father, a renowned Athenian inventor and architect famous for his numerous creations, took his talented nephew, Perdix, under his wing. Despite his young age, Perdix demonstrated remarkable skills in crafts and invention. He invented the saw, inspired by the structure of a fish's spine, and the compass, observing the circles drawn in the sand by a scorpion. Seeing how quickly his nephew was advancing in inventiveness, Daedalus began to feel envy and fear that Perdix might surpass his fame and achievements. These feelings of jealousy and rivalry ultimately led Daedalus to a terrible act. One day, while they were atop the Athenian Acropolis, Daedalus, succumbing to his dark emotions, pushed the unsuspecting Perdix off the height. But before the boy could touch the ground, Athena, the goddess of wisdom who favored Perdix for his talent and inventiveness, intervened. In flight, she transformed him into a partridge, saving him from death. Since then, partridges have flown low to the ground, avoiding heights as a reminder of Perdix's tragic fall. Ovid uses this story to show that even great masters can make mistakes when giving in to their weaknesses, and that divine justice will always find a way to restore balance. What does Bruegel do? In Ovid's account, the partridge joyfully cackled and flapped its wings in the swamp because it had heard of Icarus's fall. Bruegel places it on a branch. Among all the scene's participants, the partridge is closest to the fallen Icarus, almost in contact. But we understand that this partridge arrived here because of Ovid. And it's not just any partridge, but Daedalus's murdered nephew Perdix, pushed off the Acropolis by him. Incidentally, in Latin, a partridge is called perdix. A symmetrical construction arises. One boy who fell from a height, and then another. The crime Daedalus committed by killing his nephew, and the current retribution for that crime, the death of his own son. And the deaths are similar in nature. Both involve falls from a height. Both involve birds' wings. There a boy turns into a bird, gaining wings, and here, conversely, the wings disintegrate, and Icarus loses his wings. What is achieved with the partridge? Bruegel interprets this plot, speaking of once disrupted and restored justice. The world was distorted, harmony was disrupted, and then retribution took place. Seeking a definitive interpretation of Bruegel's paintings isn't necessary. Bruegel acts with an understanding of the multiplicity of meaning. Just as a poet, when writing a poem, understands that a word can mean several things and uses this, so too does a 16th century artist, and Bruegel in particular, create multi-layered expressions. One layer of understanding this painting is that it is about disrupted and restored harmony, that retribution is inevitable, even if it is delayed, and no one might realize it has occurred. What's happening here now? These legs sticking out of the water actually don't concern the fishermen, the plowman, or the shepherd. It is not for them. They are just incidental figures here. It makes perfect sense that they see nothing and pay no attention to the fallen Icarus. It is indifferent to them because it happens not for them. And to the viewers, the painting does not immediately reveal the full depth of the events. The viewer must connect everything to understand the message the artist conveys by choosing this plot. The only person who looks somewhat surprised is the shepherd, and he is looking in the opposite direction from Icarus. But what is he looking at? It's Daedalus, Icarus's father, and this is another version of landscape with the fall of Icarus. Although often considered less technically impressive, in some ways it's more understandable. For instance, the shepherd looks at Daedalus soaring through the sky instead of staring into nowhere. Most likely, Daedalus was added later to this copy because Bruegel is known for his subtle statements, but whether this is truly the case is unknown. In this version, the sun is still high in the sky, whereas in the other, it is setting. This raises the question, why is it not shining brightly in the heavens, even though its rays melted Icarus's wings? In the painting, the sun appears pale and low, almost like the moon, giving the impression that it's either rising or setting, but certainly not at its zenith. This suggests that a lot of time has passed between the sun scorching Icarus's wings and the depicted moment. Perhaps Icarus fell for a very long time, indicating an incredible height of his flight. However, the reason might be different. Bruegel might intentionally push the sun to the background because, in his version, the true cause of Icarus's fall and death is linked to Daedalus's crime of killing his nephew. And though the surface reason for Icarus's fall is related to the sun, in this interpretation, the sun plays no special role. Everything is perceived as temporary against the eternal light of the sun, indifferent to all human affairs. This calm, boundless landscape is painted by Pieter Bruegel from a high vantage point, as if we are looking through a telescope. Such a view can belong only to the Almighty. This perspective, as if from above, resembles the iconographic reverse perspective, where everything is seen from God's position, who sees both the ordinary and the hidden, the past and the future simultaneously. However, there is another angle in the painting. The plowman is viewed from the lower right corner. This sharp change in perspective allows Bruegel to add horizontal depth to the painting space, which we perceive as linear perspective. Thus, it seems as if the ground is rushing towards us, and the horizon stretches into infinity. In conclusion, after careful consideration, One can only confidently say, the genius of Bruegel lies in the fact that when looking at his works, we never stop asking questions, and he continues to provoke interest and discussions. Bruegel left no diaries or letters, and we know surprisingly little about him despite his immense popularity during his lifetime. However, he left the most important thing: his unmatched enigmatic paintings, full of deep meaning, irony, and allegory, which can be deciphered with ever-growing interest. Subscribe to my channel, as we will certainly talk more about Bruegel's genius in his other works. Leave your suggestions in the comments. Tell us whom you would like to learn about in future episodes. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, dear art lovers. Thank you for watching. See you soon in new episodes. This has been your Art Pastor.